welcome to this explainer. If you've ever watched a soccer match and thought, man, this is just a beautifully chaotic, totally unpredictable game of human expression, well, get ready to have your mind blown just a little bit. Today, we're completely dismantling that myth. We're going to look at the meticulous, highly structured science of how teams actually analyze match activity. So let's just dive right in and uncover the hidden geometry of the pitch.
But first, I want you to really think about this for a second. How do you actually measure the beautiful game? Seriously, how do you take the raw, split-second human intuition of a player out there on the pitch and translate that into rigorous, actionable science? Well, for decades, coaches have been obsessing over bridging this exact gap, trying to move from those gut feelings on the touchline to hard, cold data in the film room.
Here's our tactical chalkboard for today. First, we'll cover the geometry of the pitch, then balancing pairs and groups, measuring technical, tactical actions, tactical models in action, and we'll wrap it all up with a case study on the 1974 World Cup final.
All right, Section 1, the geometry of the pitch, focusing on the macro layout.
To make sense of a massive, seemingly chaotic field, analysts have to look right past your standard 4-4-2 formation. They divide the players into very specific geometric departments. You've got a defensive group at the back, a midfield department in the center, and a forward unit up top. Basically, this just establishes geographical accountability across the squad.
But here's the thing. Formations don't just slice the pitch horizontally. Analysts also draw vertical lines to split the pitch into left, right, and central groups. That central area? It's often called the spine of the team. And this grid system is absolutely crucial, because a formation constantly has to balance attacking ambition with defensive necessity. Think about it. If you push way too many players into the wide left attacking group, you're leaving that central defensive spine completely exposed. The geometry has to be perfectly balanced to maintain coverage, whether you've got the ball or you're tracking back to defend.
Moving right along to Section 2, balancing pairs and groups, looking at those micro relationships. So if we zoom in from that macro layout, we start to see these constant linear pairs operating within the broader team structure. Across the entire field, groups of two, like two central defenders, a fullback and a winger, or two forwards, are constantly working together to fulfill localized tactical agendas. And honestly, no matter what genius overarching strategy a coach comes up with, the success of the whole shebang relies heavily on how well these isolated pairs understand their tactical relationship with one another.
The real takeaway here is that a pair is literally only as good as its balance. Analysts spend countless hours making sure players in a pair actually complement each other, rather than stepping on each other's toes. Take Manchester United's legendary duo. Nemanja Vidic brought unbelievable heading ability, while Rio Ferdinand brought elite technical ball skills. It was perfect balance. Or at Chelsea, Ricardo Carvalho's sheer speed perfectly covered for John Terry's lack of pace, while Terry brought the aerial dominance. But then, look at a pairing like Jamie Carragher and Martin Skrtel. Both were incredibly aggressive, sure, but they were also both very slow. That kind of redundancy creates a massive vulnerability. Balance is absolutely everything.
All right, Section 3, measuring technical, tactical actions, where we get into the mathematical data.
If you were to walk into a top-tier professional team's film room today, you wouldn't just hear coaches talking about good passes. No way. You'd hear them talking about TTA, or technical and tactical actions. TTA represents the fundamental, measurable building blocks of a player's impact on the game. Analysts are literally categorizing every single action by its intent. They're asking, is this action meant to stabilize and hold onto the ball? Is it meant to develop an attack through the midfield? Or is it an aggressive move meant to aggravate the opposition and create a scoring chance?
And to actually score those actions, researchers use something called integral estimation. Elite teams aren't just counting the total number of passes a player makes anymore. They're assigning specific quantitative and qualitative grades to every single move. The quantitative indicators measure the sheer volume of work. So that's your intensity coefficient, your mobility, and your aggressiveness. But then you've got the qualitative indicators. That's your basic efficiency, your face-off efficiency in one-on-one situations, and finally, creativity, which measures a player's ability to pull off those highly complex, defense-splitting passes. When you put them all together, these 6 coefficients give a coach a ridiculously complete mathematical profile of how a player is truly performing.
Okay, Section 4, tactical models in action.
Before a team can even think about executing a macro-tactical model, analysts have to grade the difficulty of every individual action. They do this using 3 coordination complexity modes, or CCM. Mode 1 is the easiest. the player has the ball with basically no interference from the opponent. Mode 2 bumps up the difficulty. Now the player is in motion, dealing with tight space and time limitations. But Mode 3? That is the absolute crucible. That's executing a technical, tactical action while facing active, intense, right-in-your-face interference from an opponent.
When you chart those complexity modes across different tactical models of play, it reveals a super fascinating divide. For instance, when analyzing models A and C, teams that utilize these systems are executing a significantly higher percentage of their actions in Mode 3. Again, that's under extreme pressure. Elite teams rely on these specific models because their players actually possess the technical ability to execute complex actions even when an opponent is breathing right down their neck.
And that brings us to Section 5, our case study, the 1974 World Cup Final, a true systemic clash.
Let's see what actually happens when these data-driven models collide on the pitch. The 1974 final between the Netherlands and West Germany was the ultimate clash of systems. On one side, you had the Dutch playing total football. Their model was incredibly fluid, relying on controlling space with a super high defensive line and a collective, immediate Gegenpress to win the ball back the second they lost it. On the other side, you had the West German hybrid system. This was heavily reliant on highly disciplined defensive groups, completely orchestrated by their legendary captain, Franz Beckenbauer. He played the libero role, basically a free-roaming defender who swept up at the back and expertly directed the tactical development of the attack.
But here's the little secret that even the best analysts know. Data and models alone do not win soccer games. See, early in that tournament, the West German team was really struggling. In the preliminary round, they suffered this disastrous, completely embarrassing 1-0 defeat to their neighbors, the DDR, thanks to a goal by Jürgen Sparwasser. The German team was in full-blown crisis mode. So that evening, at the training camp, they held a highly emotional, clear-the-air team meeting that went down in history as the Malenta Night. Beckenbauer stepped up as a mediator. Players aired their grievances, and somehow, the team forged this incredible, new, unified spirit. They realized right then and there that their fancy tactical model was totally useless without the collective grit to actually execute it.
Powered by that new determination, the German team fought their way all the way to the final. And even after falling behind to an early Dutch penalty, their structural discipline and that newfound mental resilience held completely firm. They battled back to win the game 2-1 and lift the World Cup. Years later, Beckenbauer famously remarked about that embarrassing early loss, "Give Sparwasser the 23rd medal." The implication? Without the absolute shock of that defeat, they never would have found the team spirit required to execute their complex tactical models under all that pressure. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates our final takeaway today. The greatest data models and geometric formations in soccer rely just as much on human adaptation and fiery spirit as they do on the tactical chalkboard. So I'll leave you with this. What do you think is actually more important for a championship team? Perfect tactical data or perfect team spirit? Keep that in mind the next time you watch the beautiful game. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.